The Infusion Controller is the brain of the system, as mentioned, and it is a core requirement on every project. So let's talk about the form and functionality of it. First off, we're going to go over what the Infusion Controller does. We'll talk about why there are two different varieties, the 24 volt and the 36 volt. And we'll discuss how to make sure that you're matching the correct controller with the terminal board that's inside. And we'll also discuss when you would use either one of those two controllers. And then we'll also talk about the power feed requirements that are involved with those controllers. And then at the end, we are going to interact with the controller and go over some of the settings that are required within the Infusion Controller. And then we will tie the Infusion Controller in with Design Center and make a connection with Design Center and communicate with it. So first off, what does a controller do? It gives me a great object-based map of the physical system. It is also where I can connect all the system objects together, both the native and the third-party devices. So the programmer utilizes this to program and communicate with the system and set it up the way that he wants it to function, the different devices, whether they're native, such as lighting loads, the audio system, or third-party devices such as a television or a DVD player and so forth. And it also processes. This is what receives the signal from triggers that are out there, and then it acts according to the programming that you have defined or the rules that you have set up for it. It is also a time reference. It will track daylight savings as well as the astronomical clock, and so you can set up programming dependent on certain times of day. So let's look at the terminal board that is mounted inside the enclosure. We have a 36 volt or a 24 volt. Each one is individually different depending on the controller that you are putting in there. Notice that the board will say 36 volt or 24 volt. You can have up to 2 station bus runs connected. We'll discuss this in detail a little later on. Also notice that the 2 connection ports, where the white one in the bottom section has a notch on it, that is adjusted depending on if it's a 24 volt or a 36 volt. The notch would be on the top for the 24 volt. So you're not able to put the wrong controller in with the incorrect terminal board. So why do we have the 24 volt versus the 36 volt? Well, first and foremost, it is backward compatible. The prior version before the Infusion system was the Vantage Q system, and it was a 24 volt system. And so Vantage works very hard to make sure that we are backward compatible, allowing homes to be able to move forward with upgrades and new products as they come out. And so the 24 volt allows you to go into a Q system and upgrade the system with minimal hardware changeouts. Really, it's the processor and the board that are the two main things that really need to be changed out. You wouldn't need to take out all of the dimmer modules or keypads and things like that. So with the 24 volt system, it is sufficient for smaller homes where you have a smaller quantity of keypads and wired stations. The 36 volt offers 120 watts versus the 35 watts of the 24 volt. So as you can see right there, there's a huge difference in the amount of stations that the 36 volt can handle versus the legacy capable 24 volt. So as we look at some of the other components on the terminal board, notice that we have the power connection where you have a 200 watt max draw from that. Once again, the terminal pieces are notched so that when you slide the controller into place, it will line up and slide into place depending on if it's the correct board with the controller. If not, then that would stop it from being able to slide in. There's also a mounting post you'll notice on the back of those controllers that helps guide you into the hole that's on the terminal board. So with the front of the controller, we have the ability to set up and make adjustments on the controller itself. And in just a moment, we will jump to that and work through some of the different settings that you can do on the controller. So let's take a closer look at the Infusion Controller. First off, as I power it up, notice how quickly this will go through and boot. And note that this is flash memory. So it will reboot rather quickly off from any power surges, power outages that you have. Run through and initiate the verify the workload and compile it, and it'll be up and running in a matter of moments. Count up the stations and the home is back up and running. So let's talk about different parts of this. First off, you have your Ethernet connection and your USB connection. Those are both usable for programming. Recommend the Ethernet connection as the primary form of programming to the system. You have a memory card slot for backup memory flash. You have a manual override switch, which allows you to flip that up and turn on all of the lights that are connected up in that enclosure. And then you have the setup menu that you can go through and set up. So notice, if this is grayed out, it's because it's timed out. You can press any button to wake it up and it'll light it up. Also, any of these 4 buttons would wake that up. Anytime you press those, it'll pop up the menu. You have net, info, time, and C2C. For today, we're just going to focus on the net. So if I press the button underneath the word, it takes me into it. So I have multiple types of IP addressing that I can set up for the network. Notice that with the previous, next, adjust, and set, it will change or adjust or move over to the next setting or previous setting by hitting the button directly underneath those. So first off, let's look at all the different types that I have. This is static. We'll come back to this one. If I hit adjust, I have a none, and I might use this in a project that I might have multiple controllers in, setting any of the other controllers that do not have network connected up to, set those at none. DHCP allows me to have the router automatically give me an address. Good and bad about that, it is quick and easy to do though, and you don't have a lot of other settings you have to make adjustments to. The downside of that is if a router goes down and loses the address that you originally had, and you've done some port forwarding things so that you have remote access to the system, or the homeowner has an iPhone app or other one of the type of remote access type of apps, then if those settings change, you run into problems and we'll have to come out and service the project. The next setting to look at would be the default setting, which all controllers have, so that there's just a default address that you could utilize. And then the static, back to static. Now this is the recommended way to set up a project. Most projects, if you're utilizing full capabilities of the system and you don't want to worry about addresses changing, and you want to give the client the most benefits for the out of the Vantage system, then you would utilize static. So once again, if I press the next or previous, it's going to move around. Notice it jumped over to one of the numbers, and I can sit here and change each individual one of these digits of the IP address. Now as I go around the horn, keep noticing that the flashing dash stopped on the NM. So I can set up the network mask, but then come back to the NM and hit adjust, and there, that is flashing there, is telling me that there is additional settings underneath this. So if I hit adjust, now I can see the gateway, and I can set up the gateway for this controller. I can also set up the D1 and the D2, and those dynamic server addresses need to be set up if I'm going to utilize the Equinox weather widgets and email capabilities of the system. Are a couple of reasons why I need to make sure that the D1 and the D2 are set. So once I've set all of those things, I go ahead and hit set, and it'll tell me that it's saved that configuration, and now my controller is now set for that specific address, and I can now connect up to it from design.